3, 2, 1.
Hey guys, it's Challenger. I thought I would make a short video about control setup in Aces High 3, and this is it. Our goal here is to have a tank to where we can go into this refinery over here, control everything with our joysticks without having to use the keyboard, and I have just configured the computer in a new way so the controls are not being recognized. So the way to get in here is to go to Options, Controls, Map Controllers. You can see nothing has been assigned. It's seeing my Xbox 360 as the primary controller because I added it before these other joysticks. They're further down the USB chain, as it were. The first one I'm going to set up is the CH Fighter Stick. And the way that I do this is I go in and I set up mode 1 first on all the controllers that I intend to use. Then I copy it with the mode 1 settings to mode 2, mode 3, mode 4. The reason I do that is because the initial setup, all of the controls are basically the same with a slight modification for vehicles and for your secondary views. So here in the fighter stick, the axes that you want to set up for aileron, as you can see there on the x-axis, when I move it side to side, it moves from a value of 255 up to 65,535. And that is going to be our ailerons. For this particular control, you have to double-click the mode function that you want to use and set it to aileron. Elevator is the same way. It's the y-axis. Double-click it, set it to elevator. The z-axis, you can set this any way that you want. I usually use it as a zoom control or not mapped at all. In this case, I'm not going to map it. Now while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and set my curves for mode 1. The way I do that is you go into the Advanced tab and enable scaling. Now, for the most part, I want these all at 100% throw. You may not want this, but I've been flying for a long time in Aces High, and this is primarily the way that I like it to be. Now what I do after I get it set up here, this is elevator now, is I'll come in here to the center and I'll introduce just a little bit of what I can consider to be squishiness. In other words, it doesn't really give me 100% throw right off the bat. Deadband, the center of your joystick, you can move it around a little bit before it starts to take effect. Deadband is intended to keep you from, with your hand on the stick, unintentionally giving input. That's the way I look at it anyway. And damping is the amount of springiness in the control. And that's how I set that. After you've got it set, you want to go ahead and click OK. And that'll save it. We're not done though. So we're going to go back in here. We're going to do the same thing to aileron. And it's basically the same setup on aileron. Just bring that down a skosh. In case you're wondering, skosh is actually a word that came from our fighting boys in Korea. They were working with a Japanese man, and his name I can't really remember. Probably lost to history, but he used to say a little bit. Every time he talked to the men, he would say a little bit, and so his name, something Kosh, got to be known as a shortcut for a little bit. You just say Skosh. It must have been his nickname, huh? Anyway. And do a little bit of that, a little bit of this, and we'll be fine. Now we're going to fine-tune this in the air later, but for now this is going to be fine. Okay, on the other functions of the joystick, for instance, the trigger that shoots all the guns, you just pull the trigger, and it'll come over here, and what it's trying to do is get an assignment for button 0. And it's under global. We're going to fire all guns. Second one is, for instance, on the fighter stick that I'm using here, I press the red button on the top backside. It's like a thumb button. And that's my fire secondary button. And for every other button, just press the button twice, and then you can choose the function that you intend to use on that particular button. This one here, button 3, is the pinky button on the fighter stick. And generally what I tend to use that for is to switch to my other mode, which in mode 1 will be select mode 3. Now, you move down here, you can see it right here. After we copy mode 1 to all of the other modes, that button will still be set to select mode 3. So no matter what mode you're in, it's going to go to mode 3. We're going to want to change that later after we copy mode 1 to all of the other modes. But first we're going to set all of our other views and all of our other buttons. This is button 2. It's on the right-hand side of the fighter stick, and I tend to use it as a override for the modes. And in this case, seeing as how I'm in mode 1, I would want to move to mode 2. Now, the way that I use these modes, mode 1 and mode 3 are for aircraft, planes, and default. Mode 2 and mode 4 are for ground vehicles. And the reason that I do that is because not all of your functions will be the same between airplanes and ground vehicles. And the modes understand that. If you look at this, by default, mode 2 is for vehicles and boats. And that way you can map specific functions for your vehicles to those particular modes. It will not interfere with your aircraft usage. This allows you to use all of your buttons on all of your joysticks for airplanes in particular or vehicles in particular. That way an airplane functions as a function that is specific to airplanes doesn't get lost on a vehicle. You can use it for something else. But anyway, we're still in mode 1. The thumb switch on the left-hand side of the joystick, I'm going to map it to elevator trim. Forward and backward will be elevator trim. This won't work in a ground vehicle, obviously. I just did that wrong. I'll do it like this. Side-to-side functions I use for aileron on that thumb button. Very seldom do I actually trim aileron. and I might actually be better off switching that to rudder, because it's rudder that changes mostly with speed in an airplane. Your aileron and your elevator will also, but generally you trim less those two functions than you do rudder. Elevator, I trim elevator all the time. Rudder, like as I get up into the upper speed limits, I have to use a little bit more rudder trim. Aileron, because my hand is right there on the control most of the time, I can compensate with aileron. But when it comes to rudder input, rudder will add so much drag to your airplane because it moves the entire fuselage and offsets it from your center line of flight. So you want to use rudder sparingly. You want to use your rudder trim as much as possible. So in those cases where you can feel that the nose is not quite staying point on target, use a little bit of rudder trim. Don't try to use rudder offset. Okay. The thumb tang directly underneath the fire secondary button I use as a zoom in and out, so that when I'm flying, the view tends to be zoomed there. I have a double function on my throttle control. I use the CH Throttle Pro, and it has a zoom in and out also. These used to be crossed up in Aces High 2. Now that we're in Aces High 3, I'm hoping that they have fixed that, and that when I actually push forward on the stick, it's going to zoom in. Otherwise, I may have to come back and remap these functions. The zoom toggle is to the left, and weapon select is to the right. Whoops, wrong one. And now that it's set, it won't let me change it by pressing the button. Okay. The coolie hat, all the way to the top right of the joystick rear. We're going to set it to our views. Now, Mode 1 and Mode 3 are going to be exactly identical. Doesn't matter if you're in a vehicle or an airplane. Excuse me, Mode 1 and Mode 2 are going to be identical. Mode 3 is going to have up views added. That way when we switch to Mode 3, everything will be the same on the joystick except for the coolie hat. This makes it very quick for you to switch into your up view area to where you can maintain view all around your aircraft without having to go through any major maneuvers. So, as you can see, a hat switch forward, I have it set for view here, and it is going to be head position, excuse me, not head position, but look forward and up. Right there. And then forward and right is going to be front right. And right is going to be right. In other words, these are all of the level views. Right and back is going to be look back and right. Whoops. Got to be careful doing this, because just a slight click in the wrong category and you're looking in the wrong area. Back, I use to look back. Left and back is back and left. Left is left, obviously. Left and forward is look front left. Now all of those views are going to be exactly the same in our first or primary vehicle mode, which is mode 2. We're going to copy mode 1 to all the other modes. We're going to modify mode 3 and mode 4 in this view area here. So all the hat switches on this particular coolie hat will change for mode 3 and mode 4, but they'll remain the same for mode 2. That way, when you're in a vehicle, your views work exactly the same as they do in an aircraft. This other little rook hat at the bottom there, I tend to use it for moving the head position of the pilot. That would be, pulling it back would be button 10, and this would be head position back. This would be head position forward. Now, you don't have to do exactly what I do, obviously. Whoops. But this is what I've been using over the years. This is what I've refined my joystick settings for. And this works pretty good. So coming into the arena, if you learn this method, you'll already have all of the fine-tuning that I've been using for, well, almost 10 years now. I did not mean to move that to the left, that's for sure. This one can go left. And that is the joystick, the primary joystick. We're going to move now to the throttle, do the same thing. The reason that you want to do this and get all of mode 1 set is so that when you make that move, copy mode 1, it doesn't mess up all your other settings. So get mode 1 taken care of on all of your major controllers, and then come back in and modify mode 3 and mode 4. Button 4 is elevator down. That would be flight, and that would be trim. Trim up. In this case, I'm going to use rudder right and rudder left. Now you could modify that and turn it into aileron. You could use another function for rudder. In fact, I'm going to use this for aileron because what happens is I always go looking for what I have the trim set for anyway. So it doesn't really matter for aileron and rudder. I'll find it, because if it's not functioning properly, I'll use the other control. In this case, this would be the bottom thumb tang on the throttle, and I'm going to set it to rudder. And flaps. Up and down will be flaps. For emergency power. I'd love me some whip. This will be radio tune, voice transmit channel, voice transmit range. And I've got nearly everything on the throttle set already. Now if you look, the main axis forward and back here is the Z axis here. We're going to set that to throttle 1. The Z axis is the little mouse hat, what you use to slew the cursor in the jet simulators. And on here, we're going to use that for, well, we're going to use the Y function anyway for field of view. This will allow you, when you're in commander position on the tanks, to zoom in and out. It will not function in aircraft. The x-axis won't do anything. You could do it the same way. You could have it set for field of view also. But, you know, to each his own. Okay, the rook hat at the top, I do the same thing as I did for the rook hat on the fighter stick. I set it for moving the head position. And this other controller, or coolie hat on this, I do the same as I did for the weapon select and trim. Excuse me, weapon select and zoom. So that'll be... Toggle zoom, which I'm looking for. Not finding it. Here we go. And if you get to use one of these, if you use the keys the same way that I have set up, and you find that it's not functional for the way that you like to fly or the controls that you use, just change them to whatever you like. You've seen how easy and quick this is, and that's about it, especially for the throttle and joystick. I also have a CH throttle quadrant. I use it to change the RPM, or the actually what it does is it modifies the propeller pitch, but in so doing it regulates the RPM of the prop. So if you go in here to the throttle quadrant, you can see that I moved it too far. You can see that the X rotation here, which is not calibrated, can be set to RPM. And now, if I was primarily a bomber pilot, I might have those assignments done exactly the opposite. In fact, I might swing all the way to the opposite end of the throttle quadrant to set those, starting, or by engine number assignment. If you're familiar with how bombers are set up, they don't go right down the wing from left to right, 1, 2, 3, 4. They start with the inward engines and then move out. Just depending on how realistic you want to make this. I also do not set button functions on the throttle quadrant, except for this one right here, which I use as an emergency landing gear down. That way, if I have a situation where I've swung the keyboard out of the way while I'm flying and I need to get my gear down before I can land, I can reach that button easier than I can pull the keyboard out and move it down. And that's about all there is to that. We have to do the rudders also. The Z-axis is the rudder. X-axis is the left-hand brake. That would make the y-axis the right-hand brake. And now we're ready to copy mode 1 to mode 2, 3, and 4. This is real easy. All you gotta do is press that button 3 times. Now, in mode 3 and mode 4, as I told you before, we need to change the view hat switch on the fighter stick so that it includes up for all of these settings. In fact, when I use the first one was front up, it now becomes up. Front right, up right. Look, excuse me. Front right should be up front and right. And that appears to be set correctly. And then right becomes upright. Back right becomes back upright. Back becomes back and up. Back left becomes back up left. Left is left and up. There we go. And front left is front up and left. You want to do the same thing for mode 4. I keep missing. And that's all there is to it. Now, on mode 2 and mode 4, the aileron and elevator trim, or excuse me, axes, are going to be very sensitive on the tank barrel. You can correct the scaling of this to make it much more to your liking for vehicles by taming that barrel right down. And I'll give you an approximate curve here that I use. These things will cooperate and move with me here. And this will allow you to have a much finer movement toward the center of the joystick, and it'll speed up as you get out toward the edge. So that if you want to turn your barrel in a hurry, you just move it to the extent of your throw as far as you can, and the barrel will start to rotate quickly. But as you get in closer and you want to refine your movement in order to zero in on your target, say it's far away, you can do that. It doesn't, that way your tank barrel won't jump left and right and up and down. So you want to do this on aileron and elevator, the same type of curve. It doesn't have to be exact. The idea is just so that you can slow down the center of the throw there, make things more precise for you. Anyway, I hope that helps. I'll be into flying next time, and we'll get a tank out here and drive it, and go smash up some factories or something. Hopefully, we'll be online soon. I just discovered that my track IR is messed up, so I'm going to try to go back to my track IR 4. If it's not functional, I may have to wait until I get a new unit in from the factory. All right, y'all take care. It's been fun. Like, subscribe, come back and see us later.